Joining us now to break down the latest in the 2024 presidential race and so much more is my governor, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Governor, really good to have you. And by the way, when people talk to me, how's Governor DeSantis doing? I say he's doing great. You know, living in Florida, I'm just not tired of winning, as Trump would have said. You keep winning, Governor. Before we get into some of the other things, I would just love to hear your first reaction to Super Tuesday. You know, Trump basically swept the field with the exception of Vermont, and then Nikki Haley bowing out this morning. Your thoughts?
Well, it was, I think, to be expected. I mean, you know, she had waged a campaign on the idea that you can somehow win the Republican nomination for president by getting the votes of mostly just non-Republicans, and that just doesn't work. And we saw that play out in Iowa, and I said at the time that that she didn't have a pathway. So I'm glad we're all through that process, and you know, now we're in a situation where Republicans are staring down the barrel of a President Biden who's clearly not up to the job. And you know, as a candidate in 2020, you know, I made that same argument, but if you compare him to 2020 to now, I mean, the guy is clearly slowed down dramatically. His policies have not worked. So now's the time for that to be the focus.
Very quickly, Nikki Haley made the debate stages with you over at Fox and others. I think there's a couple other people had debates. On the premise that the RNC required everyone to say that they would eventually, if you're going to make that debate stage, you would eventually support the eventual nominee. She rose her hand, said she would, and now has kind of backtracked so far, didn't support him, said she might not support him. What is your recommendation? I mean, it's probably not your job to give her political recommendations, but what's your advice to Haley? You know, especially, listen, you know, the two of you right now, for me, are the odds-on favorites for the GOP in 2028, and I'd say you have the inside track.
Well, first, just on the debates, you know, I was saying that Newsmax should have had a debate, so I was game for that. RNC didn't do that. But yeah, I signed the pledge, and you signed the pledge saying that you're going to not take your ball and go home. And so I honored the pledge, and she's going to have to make a decision about whether she wants to or not. But the idea that somehow circumstances have changed, I think we all knew what we were doing when we did that, and you got to make a judgment about whether that's meaningful to you. And so for me, I tell people, you know, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it.
All right, so we'll move on. I mean, there's a lot of speculation on who was supporting Nikki Haley through this, and you know what took them so long. They spent $114 million. Governor, just one more thing on the race coming up. Scarborough, and you point out that Joe Biden is flawed, but Joe Scarborough over at MSNBC thinks that Joe Biden's at the top of his game. Listen.
You know what? I don't really care. Start your tape right now, because I'm about to tell you the truth. And F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Okay. Before we ask you to answer that, take a look at the little thing we put together on this version of Biden intellectually and analytically. Watch.
Let me start off with two words. Made in America.
I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping.
And then we're going to have to use Title 8. 8, right? Am I right? Yeah, Title 8. 8, 9.
Putin's kleptocracy. Kleptocracy. And the guys who are the kleptocracies.
Mixing up world leaders with people he supposedly talked to last week or last month who've been dead for decades. Sir, why is the left just, you know, I don't know, just complete, don't look over there, don't see what Biden really is. It's just completely scorched earth that Biden's okay?
Well, look, I mean, I think that, you know, in 2020, he was clearly a candidate that had lost a step then. Now, it's even night and day between 2020 and 2024. And then you got to think, Eric, if for somehow he was awarded a second term, is this a guy that could go until he's 86 years old, serving a second term as president? I don't think anybody believes that. And I think if you look at some of the polling that comes out, and we could sit here and quibble about how these polls are done, but I mean, it's not just the Republicans that think that he can't handle the job anymore. I mean, it's 65, 70% of the public. So that's a lot of people that voted for him in 2020 are saying that. So if the media is going to try to say differently, I think people generally are going to believe what they see in front of them.
All right, let's do a little bit of this because, again, I reside in the great state of Florida. Governor, no state income tax. You protect the Second Amendment like no other state in the union, bar none. It's just amazing what you're doing. Also, you push back on these state-funded or state-supported groups that may be getting some taxpayer money and hiring on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you push back on that. University of Florida, we can see, has now terminated all their DEI positions. Tell us about how that's going, what brought it about, and how it's going.
Well, last year I signed legislation eliminating DEI in the state of Florida. So we provided the universities with that mandate, and they had this academic year to comply. So the University of Florida has done that by firing the DEI staff. That was because of state law saying that. And we want to treat people as individuals in the state of Florida. We don't want to divvy up people based on race or ethnicity. And we certainly don't want to discriminate against people, which is what DEI does. They say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. In practice, what it's been is discrimination, exclusion, and indoctrination. And that has no place in American society. And it certainly doesn't have a place in our publicly funded universities. And so we were the first state to abolish DEI, and now a few other states have followed.
Governor, in the state of Florida, there's a multi-billion-dollar pension fund, and at one point we've talked several times about this, about the ability to move the money to the people who manage the funds, the multiple billions of Floridians who've paid into this pension fund, away from companies that use DEI as part of their investment portfolio. How's that going?
Well, so we now, by law, have eliminated any non-financial considerations from our pension fund, DEI, ESG, all of that. We did take money from BlackRock and move it out, but we've laid a very strong line in the sand on that. And what you've seen is basically people that have wanted to manage the money at this point. They have to say that they're not going to indulge in any of the things like ESG and all this. And the question is why does that matter for people? Well, one, this is a cop's pension or a firefighter's pension or a teacher's pension. Shouldn't that be invested with an eye towards delivering the best results for those folks instead of some activists, investment managers' ideological agenda? Of course so. But also, these guys wield a lot of power, and when they're doing things like ESG and DEI, that actually can change society. It can change policies. They go after fossil fuels, Second Amendment, all these things. So by us pushing back, we're also protecting, I think, the public beyond just our pension system, because we, the American people, should govern ourselves through our constitutional system. We should not have a handful of asset managers be able to swoop in and impose a left-wing agenda on us without our consent.
You're setting the standard. You're raising the bar high for other states, and you're doing a great job. And Petronas, your CFO, is doing a great job with that, too. Governor, the other issue that is interesting, tell us what's going on with this Epstein files. With the victims, you're working with them. Are you looking to be able to finally get eyeballs on the Jeffrey Epstein list of people who were his friends and people who may have done some pretty bad things?
Sure. So this all happened long before I was governor. We all know the feds helped engineer a sweetheart deal in Palm Beach County for Epstein. He basically got a slap on the wrist. That's 2006, 2008 time period. When I became governor a few years ago, I launched a criminal investigation into how did this happen. The problem that we kept running into, though, is almost all the material was protected by Florida's grand jury secrecy laws, which those laws do make sense in normal circumstances. People have tried to sue to get it. The courts have slapped them down. So the Florida legislature passed a law to basically provide an exception to the grand jury secrecy laws in Florida so that these Epstein grand jury transcripts will be eligible for disclosure. So that law, I signed the law the other day. I did have some of the Epstein victims with me. It goes into effect July 1. So this summer, Eric, people are going to be able to petition to get those files released to the public. That will happen. And our hope is that justice can finally be served, because as of right now, you have, of course, Epstein, who's dead. You have Ghislaine Maxwell, who's in federal prison. And that's it. Nobody else has ever been held accountable for this. Are you kidding me? Are you trying to say nobody else was involved? I don't think there's anybody that believes that.
We can't wait to see what gets exposed, and we'll look at that July 1st, as you point out. Governor, before we go, you've said so many things, and I've told my audience time and time again, you're doing things on the state level that should be on the national level. The reason why I bring that up, Trump is now the presumptive nominee. He hasn't announced the VP for a long time. I've asked you this. I'll ask you one more time. If he were to tap you for vice president, would you accept?
What I said from the beginning is, I ran for president because I thought I could do more as president than I could for Florida and the country as governor. But I really believe I can do more for Florida and the country by remaining governor than any other position. So I think Florida's played a vital role in preserving and preserving freedom and fighting the left. So I'm where I need to be. And I think that I don't think anyone will be picked anytime soon. I think he's going to wait until we get closer to the convention. But that person will not be me.
Can't imagine Trump, DeSantis, hard to beat, folks, and then you walk into 8 years of DeSantis. It's just makes so much sense for me, Governor. Good to talk to you. Appreciate your time, and again, keep killing it in Florida. Appreciate you.
Thanks, man. See ya.